All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. We're talking again about the flood and various other topics, which will eventually include Genesis Apologetics. So this time, we hope I will not hit the stop broadcast button by accident. I moved the screen
Oh
over,
well,
so it should be
yeah,
harder to hit now.
yeah,
Next time, if I hit it, we'll know that I did it intentionally.
yeah. He said, "Uh-oh, Jimmy's going off the rails. You got to stop him now."
But anyways, the video. Yeah, the video. Okay.
Mhm.
Also read RJ's Dinomania. He's been telling me about
Yeah,
it.
if you got the video hook up there, you can just paste the blurb across there. They can find all this crap at my website, and all I need, and you can put that over there because I probably don't have editorial power to put up a thing that's got a .com on it anyway, even if I were in the chat window. But you can copy and paste that, and they can find that under the old tip there, Dinomania, Chapter 3, Troubles in Paradise. It was fun writing it. That was really the first chapter when I was doing the book back in the early 2000s that got really large I was realizing that, yeah, I actually need to explore it at more depth than I really even thought that I was doing in the earlier chapters. And every chapter from then on got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger as I dived deeper and deeper into the stuff. And I went from hundreds to thousands of sources, and nothing ever stopped. But young Earth creationism flood geology tramples on more things, whether it knows it or not, than any other single topic. Because you're trampling on biogeography, you're trampling on history, you're trampling on geology and radiometric dating issues. It's just a heck of a lot of stuff that has got to go down the toilet in order to maintain flood geology.
Yep,
So
definitely.
how this Genesis things, which I haven't seen, they're apparently all doing just videos because I don't have anything in my bibliography on them. Apparently, they don't have like a normal website like self-respecting people.
I actually, well, they have a Facebook page. I emailed them and they told me they have a Facebook page. Um, but that's about it. They don't have anything on Twitter
Yeah, you got
yet.
to friend me on Facebook so we can
I did.
be connected up that way. I don't do as much on Facebook. Otherwise, I put linkages and stuff to that and make some comments in that every once in a while. But I find
Oh,
Twitter a platform that I enjoy because it's linear, and I'm seeing stuff in a direct way that's very, very different from that kind of little set of boxes stuff that you get in Facebook, or for that matter, the great debate community. That's another, basically a set of little separate boxes, and so you have conversations that are going on within the little box, but they compartmentalize a little too easily. So Twitter I find fun. I find Twitter haiku very entertaining.
hey, they're on your end of the country. They're in Folsom, California.
Well, that's south down there. Yes, yes, that's Folsom. Folsom is
Oh,
a
they
prison.
do have a website, genesisapologetics.com, on their Facebook page. On
Oh, how sweet.
their website now.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll have to look at that.
junior high, high school. Oh boy, what is this? This is like, wait, these are Holt, Pearson, Glencoe. Those are all respectable uh books.
Oh, junior high, high school, Genesis Apologetics. I'm looking at their website, Debunking Evolution Series. Check out our news store. Ooh.
Oh no.
And look for
Oh,
more information on our news.
oh, I see what it is. What they're saying is, okay, they have the textbooks and they have the chapters that teach evolutionary biology
Oh, they're
highlighted.
going to. Oh, this could be interesting. Yes, I'll have to fiddle with this.
And
Yes, this
so
could be
they're
very interesting.
I guess what they're doing is they're providing creationist students with material to quote counter the evolutionist teachings, which is really funny because
Yeah.
I live in Louisiana and we have always been a problematic state with regard to teaching creationism in the classroom.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, especially with that kind of look the other way, Bobby Jindal.
Yeah, we actually 2008 the Louisiana Science Education Act, ironically, is totally against science.
Yeah, and they're underfunded. I have a niece who is a very diligent teacher up north in oh yipes, it's near Shreveport, and
Up north.
well, whatever the thing up yipes. God, I can't think of the name offhand. Alexandria, and
Oh, that's south of me.
oh wow. At any rate,
Alexandria is a way south, yeah.
and she has to put in money of her own to to help with the kids and all that kind of stuff. They're really cash strapped, and this is not good for an
No.
educational system to have to squeak by on that front.
Well,
And of
hey,
course,
I mean, think about it. It's worse in Kentucky. Williamstown has to rely on the Ark Park for money.
yeah, especially when they're so diligent as to not paying their taxes. That's paying your fair share thing. We have a fairly liberal state up here in Washington. We have still
They must
local.
be good friends with Trump.
We've always been very gung ho for education. And there's been major adjustments in the way the schools have been built. We've upgraded stuff and computer labs and technology and all that kind of stuff. So it's we take our education seriously up here in civilization land in Washington State.
You oh so enlightened Northerners.
Yeah, well, yeah, we were mercifully spared from a lot of the things. That we don't have high humidity and we didn't experience the Civil War.
Well, there was no Washington yet, to be fair, so.
No, it was just a territory in that. Although there was actually, I think, a brief Civil War battle-ish there at Astoria or somewhere at the very beginning of the war down in Oregon, but it's still part of the territory. But yeah, all of this area, there were settlements in Seattle in the 1850s, so that predated it, but it was still territory. And Spokane wasn't formed until 1874 and burned to a crisp in 1889 and rebuilt like mad after that. So all of our world out here is way younger, and we don't really have a connection to it. We became a state in 1889, so that's all a relatively recent history by comparison to all of those things in the barbarian East.
The oldies over here. But so the video, the major hangups for the video, I mean, between diligently quote mining Charles Darwin, which I have to say their quote mine was not the I for once. I mean, it's obvious whoever made the video has not read the Darwin book, which they never do, ever, which is sad because it's actually a really good book.
Yeah, and he's a delightful, and all of Darwin's stuff. He was a very good writer. It's an amazing thing to realize that The Origin of Species was his quickie abstract. He dashed off in a hurry.
Yeah,
minus all the footnotes. This 400-page tome that was the quickie abstract of his main arguments, just so he could get it out there. After that Wallace matter.
What they quote mined? They quote mined two little statements from him, one from chapter 6 and one from chapter 9, and the quotes, both of them ran to the effect of, I don't know why there aren't more transitional, or why there aren't more transitional fossils, why there aren't more fossils. And in the video, they make it sound as though he doesn't know why there aren't more fossils. But if you read literally the next statement, the same with the I quote, you see the case is not what it seems like.
Yeah, he's always doing this as the way a scientist is supposed to. Here is the potential objection, and then here's what I have to say about it. Yeah. And he was anticipating that there would be a lot more things that would be clarified on whales and other areas, which, of course, it took a long time to do. It took 100 years after he died to clarify a lot of that. But the fossil genie is ever busy.
Yeah, very true. Very true. With regard to with regard to both of the quotes, he recognized the fossilization process in his own day was imperfect. A lot of the he attributed a lot of shells and whatnot to the Silurian, even though they probably weren't. They might have been Ordovician or Devonian
Well,
or something.
the terms were very squishy in those days. Those were
Yeah,
relatively new things, and some of the material would have been written in the 1830s and 40s when the terms that we now use to describe stuff weren't necessarily in play at that time. Some of the subdivisions hadn't really been worked out, so you don't find him really talking about the Cretaceous and the Triassic.
right.
Those are terminologies that came along really in the 1860s and 70s. Sedgwick, who was a very devout guy, wouldn't pass muster at Answers in Genesis because he's not a young earth creationist. He recognized that that was like metaphor. Don't take all of that seriously, gang. But it was a tumultuous time as they were trying to figure out where things were going. Would you expect the paleontology that hadn't been done? Most of it was just very new. Paleontology as a discipline had only started up in the 1830s and 40s, and it was a long time before it reached more rigorous things. And a lot of the places, if you want to find the history of whales, well, we know where you would have to go. He would have been digging in Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody was digging in Pakistan at the time. So
Right.
why would anybody have found that stuff? It wasn't that the information wouldn't theoretically have been available, and we still have no idea how much stuff, eroded out, and how much stuff was in the Solnhofen deposit that was just chopped up as lithographic limestone for lithographic plates before they found, oh, what's this weird birdie thing here? Ooh, Archaeopteryx. That just came out right after Origin of Species in like 1865 or 6, somewhere around in that period.
I thought it was 61.
It was anyway. It was around there. It was right after. It was like one of those.
Yeah.
Oh, here, look at that! You don't think there's a transitional form? Here's the Archaeopteryx, and of course,
Well, yeah,
Creation doing headstands on it ever since.
yeah, I mean, he even recognized in the book that the platypus and the lungfish showed features of different groups of animals that they weren't yet associated with. He
Yeah,
recognized.
Richard Owen refused to believe that that a platypus was real. He thought it was, cobbled together. He just went conniption fit. But you see, he was very different from the Darwin type. Darwin was a field scientist, and the same thing with Wallace. These were people that actually went out and looked in the world and collected specimens down and dirty. Whereas your Baron Cuvier types from France and your Richard Owens, these were guys that stayed in their little museum-bound cubicles and had specimens sent to them. So they're devoid of geological context, they're devoid of details, so everything gets kind of parsed up. Louis Agassiz, that little racist jerk, who was also a big fish expert, and ironically, his son became a very big evolutionist, so there was a particular irony. He's the one that, I think it was I can't remember whether it was the elder Agassiz or the younger that had this thing at the University of California, the big statue of him. And during the San Francisco earthquake, it got completely upended, and there was Agassiz buried into the ground at the college. The strange ironies of life. But they were just realizing that there were these things. There had a lot of fish fossils in certain areas. You had a lot of these things that eventually became the cliches of mass graveyard bits that you still find popping up in creationist thing. I think most average creationists, intelligent designers, don't think about it, but the young earth creationists do. They really think that most of the fossil record is composed of these mass graveyards, and that's simply not true. That in fact, so unusual that it's basically pop the champagne corks if you've got more than one specimen at a time. It's very unusual.
Yeah, in the video, in the full length video, they present like Maiasaur beds or Centrosaur beds as though these constitute all like dig sites, and they even have, believe it or not, they even have a clip from Is Genesis History where they're looking at I should have done research on the paleontologist guy they talked to. I don't remember his name, but it's very strange. The Dale Tackett is out there with this guy, and like a paleontologist guy, I guess, and they're a bunch of
Yeah,
students.
I can't remember. There was Marcus Ross, maybe a youngish guy.
No, it was an old guy or older guy.
Oh, okay, it can't be him because Marcus Ross is quite young, and same thing with even Kurt Wise isn't all that old.
Yeah, it was a. I don't remember. I don't think I've ever seen him before, but at any rate, there are a bunch of students out there and they're digging in the rocks, and he's like it's very easy to look at all the complexity in the fossils and be a creationist. And it's like what? No, but
No, in fact, that's why it's so difficult to be an anti-evolutionist paleontologist, is because you are constantly finding things that you can't account for, and none of your side can make sense of. It's always got to be parsed down into little things. So they can be okay on specialties. They can look at things in very narrow boxes, but there's only going to be a limit as to how much they can deal with things. And none of them have been movers of the shakers in this area. You haven't had a notable paleontologist who was a non-evolutionist in the last 100 years.
yeah, and one of the reasons I really feel like I should have looked it up because he mentioned hydraulic sorting and I know
The get out of explanation free card of young Earth creationism.
I mean yeah, hydraulic sorting is totally hydraulic sorting of fossils is totally bogus for many reasons, but he says it, and so it makes me wonder, is this guy actually a paleontologist? Because if he is, then he's flat lying. If he's not, then he's just quoting creationist
I know
material.
Snelling appeared in the show. I wonder if they were actually using him, but if so, he's not a paleontologist.
No, they used Snelling
He's a
earlier in the video.
geologist.
They used Snelling earlier
Okay.
because they had
Yeah,
they had
you
a
can
whole.
find the name on that because I didn't look through all of the subsections on the thing, so I didn't follow through on all of that. And so you can give me the name of it. That'll give some. I'm much more of a print person than video, as you may have noticed.
Let me see. Paleontologist no, it wasn't Kurt. Was it?
You know, although Wise
Was it
actually
Marcus Ross?
maybe Kurt Wise, because Wise studied under Stephen Jay Gould back in like the 80s or 90s. And so that's been like 20 years ago. So he could easily be in his 40s, 50s by now.
Let me see.
Younger than I
Paleontology.
am, but not much.
No, it was a fairly older guy. Oh, Arthur Chadwick.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. He is an old fart. Yes. He's been around for a long time. Chadwick had stuff on, he goes way back. I'll pull him up in my bibliography and see what all I got on him. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Arthur G. There we go. 1981, Precambrian pollen in the Grand Canyon, and geoscience research of dinosaurs and men, and then 2004, modern framework for earth sciences in a Christian context, the trilobite enigma of complexity. So a lot of his creationist publications are 15, 20 or more years old. But yeah, he's an grand old man in that area. Relatively, he doesn't actually publish all that much. But obviously is able to be trotted out to do the air quotes paleontology for the video.
He's an Adventist, I guess.
Yeah. That's in fact an awful lot of the creationist paleontology is done by the Adventists. The ones that were digging up the whales down there, Leonard Brand and that bunch, and there's another guy popped up in one of the other creationist videos that he was a new character on the block. And there's a small cluster of them. Adventism is not as doctrinally committed to young Earth creationism as it used to be, although they haven't abandoned it completely. But an awful lot of modern
Look at Ben Carson. Look at Ben Carson.
Yeah, well, Ben Carson's in his own little universe. He kind of whips it up on his own, and of course we have that. When I heard about that idiotic claim about the pyramids being Joseph's granaries, I mean, this is 1840s era pseudoscience. Is not even modern pseudoscience, and so clearly there's a whole bunch of little tropes that circulate in the subculture that aren't even part of the lore. Some of the claims he was making on health issues and that actually don't fit Adventist theology. an Adventist social policy. Adventists actually, along with Jehovah's Witnesses, are often very much leery about breaching the separation of church and state thing, because they're minority religions. They're the ones that are on the short end of the stick if you suddenly have the Baptists and the big groups running the show. So they're actually kind of queasy about that in a way that you don't find amongst the others. Same thing with the odd position that the Moonies are in, or Mormons. Mormons have about the same proportion of creationists in their demographics as Baptists in that do, but doctrinally, they're very leery of jumping onto that third rail of state interference with things. So they've tended never to take a position on it doctrinally, whereas the Southern Baptists in that are Southern Baptists because they didn't like the fact that the regular Baptists were starting to object to slavery back in the 1850s, and so they just up and created their own little separate group. Yeah, but remember, Darwinism is the racist bunch. Yes, we have to remember that. Oh,
yeah. If I'm sure there are like at least 3 different articles I think I've seen on Darwinism and Answers in Genesis, because they're just Darwinism is the ideological boogeyman, and it has to be for them, even if
they never talk about Einsteinism or Newtonism. But definitely Darwinism, and the same thing goes on over intelligent design. They will refer to evolutionists and the like, but boy, it's Darwinism or neo-Darwinism, and it's practically like a swear word to them. It says, "Oh, these Darwinists," or Darwiniacs. If you're Ann Coulter, she decided to go for an ad hominem.
I like it. But one of the chief criticisms of Wells' book, The Icons of Evolution, is that he used Darwinist or Darwinism meant pretty much anything he wanted it to on every other page.
Oh, yeah. Well, he knows his audience. And remember, he's a minister in the Unification Church. The demographics of Moonies are very hyper conservative. They're very paranoid, and the little father up at the top took a disliking to Darwinism. And that was all it took. They underwrote his degrees, both in philosophy and biology at the University of California, Berkeley. And so that's a hell of a lot of money. So he owes his PhDs to his church background. And in that context, that politicization and demonization aspect is entirely consistent with the Mooney worldview, which is very, very peculiar and restricted if you're familiar with much about them. There was a really hilarious moment when Jonathan Wells was being interviewed by Pat Robertson.
Boy.
And apparently Robertson didn't know that Wells is a Mooney, and apparently the subject didn't come up. And I can understand Wells would not want to bring it up, because Robertson's whole worldview regards all these weird little cults, like including Catholicism to some extent, but definitely Moonies as apostate and false doctrine. And so it was hilarious that apparently you just don't get this kind of note comparison thing, so that you have some sense of who you're talking to. Whereas now your young earth creationists are much fussier about who's in the club. So they will occasionally cite Michael Behe or Wells, but they're very careful. They would much rather cite people in-house who are approved young earth creationists, and only when necessary, which they often have to go over into that area because so few of their people are doing the kind of work that a Michael Behe might be doing. And so they've got to parasitize the intelligent design movement, but be very careful not to be too dependent on it, because it is, after all, not accepting the true chronology. They're apostates, they're compromisers with all of those extra zeros.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's just Darwinism can refer to racism or the neo-Darwinian synthesis, or it can refer to atheism or whatever the heck you need it to. I mean,
it's all one giant package deal if you're in the culture camp in young earth creationist point of view. So whether you're Ken Ham or Kent Hovind or any of them, it's all one big blob that throws in stellar evolution and everything else. But Darwin, yes, Darwin is their bugbear, and the intelligent designers will do the same thing. He's a nice little pot shot, but of course, I don't need to know anything at all about good old Chucky Darwin when I'm talking about the reptile mammal transition, because it's all
Exactly.
after he was alive. And so it's very charming. Let's all go antiquarian here. Let's talk about gas lamps and Charles Darwin. But excuse me, we can move on and look at the data that's more in the last 100 years. We don't need that. Darwin got a lot right and a lot wrong. He didn't
Right.
understand genetics because he didn't exist yet. He didn't understand the mechanisms of inheritance. They didn't figure that out in detail until DNA came along, long after he came along the scene.
He thought dogs came from different species of canids.
Yeah,
Or
he
how?
made a lot of presumptions about things. He entertained that gemule idea of inheritance.
Oh yeah.
Cockamamie. But given how little they knew, it was not that implausible on stuff. You know, I mean,
Right.
that in his lifetime, literally only about 10 years before Darwin died, was the very first time that they had actually pinned down that sperm fertilizes the egg in vertebrates.
Mm-hmm.
It was that recent. And so there's lots of things that you can cut them slack on, and I cut a lot of other people slack. I cut Richard Owen slack on some of these things. I cut Cuvier and others that they didn't know some of the things, just as I cut a lot of the geologists slack in their criticisms of plate tectonics back in the pre-1970s period, because in those days, they didn't understand seafloor spreading. And so they had no idea what the mechanism was. So
Right.
it was perfectly logical for some geologist to go all grumpy cat with this amateur geographer Wegener guy and his stupid continental drift thing.
Oh yeah. He was also like, they pushed up like the continents as they were moving. They like pushed
yeah, they were literally
up whatever it was.
plowing along across
Yeah.
the ocean thing. And boy, that isn't how it works. And so when the geologists would just really look askance at Dutoit and some of these others who were figuring out that, yes, something was going on, but we didn't know what. Ironically, one of the people who was one of the first to see what the mechanism was without getting it widely known was this woman, and I can never remember her damn name. But she was a geologist who was given very short shrift in the 1920s because she was a woman. And when she saw these first bits from the 1920s, when they were seeing the first bits of the Atlantic Ridge, she's saying, "Ooh, that could have something to do with that."
Ooh, I know what you're talking about. I know who you're
Yeah,
talking about.
Neil Shubin wrote a wonderful book on stuff, and it's included in him. He did a lot of these little backs. I'm pretty sure it's Shubin's thing. I'll see if I can zap up and find the
She was
title
on an
on that.
episode of the new Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson. They did an episode.
Let's see. It's The Universe Within: Discovering the Common History of Rocks, Planets,
Oh
Planets,
yeah, I
and
read that
People.
book.
Shubin, and he goes into that, and also I think he mentions Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin and some of the stuff that the other women scientists of the period, early geologists and that. So that was a wonderful book on that, because it was well deserved to bring attention.
Oh
to
yeah,
people.
I really liked it.
The annoyance that you feel for these idiots who would just look down their nose and stunt the careers of women trying to do science in the field just because they had skirts is just appalling. And you're going, oh, come on, get over it.
Yeah.
But we're just now getting over it, because you still have the case of where that they've conducted experiments that a lot of scientists to this day, if they're women, they will not use their full name. They will use an initial, so that you can't tell what sex they are, because they can get a certain degree of prejudice in terms of how easily things are cited or not. Although it's harder and harder to do that in the world of internet and things where you can find out backgrounds on stuff. But we should have moved beyond this, Jackson, but we haven't yet.
Well, yeah, it's pretty sad, but
so resume with the critique of the cute movie there, our Genesis.
Yeah. So they talk. So they do the quote mining is fairly small with regard to their main arguments, which are primarily that two things, and you're gonna love this. The first one is their complete and utter misunderstanding of what um, living fossils are. They do the whole thing where, oh look, here's a skeleton of a modern frog, and here's a frog
And it's just the same. It's
from the Middle
absolutely just the
Jurassic.
same. They're both froggy.
Exactly, they
Yeah,
both look like frogs, so
get
there is
that a
no
lot.
evolution.
And in fact, there's not a single living fossil that is the same species as its ancient counterpart, or usually not even genera, and sometimes not even in the same damn family. They're generally formally similar. They tend to be, I think I mentioned it in a tweet to you, the fact that one thing that does seem to show up with living fossils is they tend to be generalists. Coelacanths live at depth. They're relatively predator-free. They have a nice, slow, leisurely lifestyle, and they can eat practically anything, and do. So they're not dependent on particular predator-prey relationships, that they can just kind of muddle along. And that seems to be kind of the case for a lot of these ones. It's also built into the creationist worldview, and to some extent the intelligent designers will play off of living fossils too, is they seem to get hung up on the idea that who says things have to change? There is no constant speedism escalator of evolution that requires everything to change. And so it's just twaddle that it requires that to be the case. Are we getting somebody coming in? Yeah, hello, Jackson. Am I alone? I see. Waiting for people to join this video call. Share the permanent link. Bookmark and come back anytime. And I see I'm the only one here. Hello. Well, I won't let there be dead air time because according to the thing, it's still live. So I'll continue prattling on until Jackson can pop back in and we can figure out what the hell we're doing. But yeah, we were talking living fossils. And coelacanths are a case of that. Some of the horseshoe crabs are tossed off as a living fossil. They're not the same group that existed in the past. There's been variations to them. And in fact, coelacanths are a fascinating example because they've now had a chance to look more at their metabolism and how it's transitional on a lot of features that are related to what's going on in tetrapods, versus what's going on in fish. So the creationists don't pay any attention to that follow-up work. Hello, Jackson. Where are you? Where are you? Let me try to re-enter, and we'll see what we'll. Yeah, I'm waiting for people to join this video call. Well, okay. So, hello. I am the only person in the video call. Jackson has been raptured, or kidnapped by space aliens, or something strange has happened, and I am alone in the world. And we were talking about this Genesis creationist film that he was criticizing. We were talking back and forth about that. We were going to be talking about the wackiness of flood geology, which I definitely wanted to continue in more detail. Flood geology is the weird thing of creationism. It's the spot that requires them to basically trample over almost everything in the sciences. There's almost nothing that escapes the maw of young earth creationism. It's very, very different from intelligent design that can get away without ever bothering about how old the earth is, or when flagella appeared, or why stars are the way they are, or any of that other stuff that vex the creationist. Jackson Wheat I've evidently lost internet. We'll have to continue this another time, I'm afraid. Okay. Alrighty. Well, I'll have to then shut off from my end. And will this shut off automatically? That's the question. Because these things kind of lurk in the middle of nowhere, and I don't have the ability to shut it off. So I am going to leave the room, and anybody who's watching this, it may be going on indefinitely, or it may decide to just stop on its own. So sorry for people who might have been led astray on that. I wonder if I could go ahead and start up a thing on my end. He lost the internet. Maybe he can slip back into it. All right. Anyway, we'll let Jackson reorganize, and we'll talk a bit more, because there's certainly a hell of a lot to talk about in relation to flood geology, and it obviously isn't going away. We have people in the government who believe in this claptrap. Okay, au revoir.